So, welcome everybody to the podcast, the Tech Nerds But Not Really podcast, our first episode. My name's Joshua Karish, and with me tonight is Matt.
Hey guys, Matt Rothman. Happy to be here. Not a tech nerd, not really a tech nerd, but hey, I'm excited to be here. And thank you, Josh, for hosting this great podcast.
And Jake.
Thank you, Josh. I'm Jake. I think I'll take the term nerd with a with a badge of honor. I consider myself a tech nerd, and I'll take it. Nice to see you guys, Josh, and thanks for hosting.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks. And I suppose I'm a bit of a tech nerd myself. And so the purpose of this podcast is for us to share our varied experiences surrounding the IT ecosystem. We're all consultants in different ways, mostly surrounding CRM and Salesforce and other platforms. And so that is what brought us together. And we thought it would be a good idea to tell you about how we met for the first time and ended up here having a podcast. So perhaps, Matt, you'd like to kick us off on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. So the three of us worked together for a software company that was a Salesforce ISV. And Jake and I, before that, worked for another consulting company together. So we've all kind of crossed paths. We're colleagues, coworkers, and really enjoyed each other's company. And the idea behind Tech Nerds, but not really, is that, we all work in the tech space. We're passionate about technology, and we have various levels of just technology, like when it comes to coding or development or whatever it is. But, when I think of tech nerds, do I fall in that category? Maybe, maybe not. But hey, like there's more to us than that. But hey, we are going to be talking about technology, and I'm excited to be here and talk to you guys and really build a relationship with the audience out there. So, I'm excited to talk about today's topic. And Josh, why don't you kind of talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today?
Surely. And I didn't realize you guys worked together before we all worked together. So I'm a little bit of an outsider here.
Interestingly enough, Josh, both of the companies that Matt and I worked at together are no longer in existence. They were both gobbled up by larger companies. It's kind of funny. And we were both gone at the time that both of those companies were gobbled up. So we didn't even get that sweet piece of the pie, when you hear about tech companies being gobbled up. But that didn't happen for us. But that's okay. That's okay. I'm not bitter at all.
not at all.
I mean, what you described, Jake, was like the tech industry as a whole, right? Yeah. Like everyone's getting acquired and, layoffs, mass hirings, it's a roller coaster ride that we've fallen off a few times and just gotten back on.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
Well, excellent. And I'm sure it's a bit of a process when a company gets acquired. And that is what we're going to discuss tonight.
Seamless transition. Seamless transition. I love it. I love it. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm here all night. And so we're all actually, we all utilize process in our daily lives. Everybody does, whether you recognize it or not. But as a consultant, we rely on process very heavily to do our jobs, our day-to-day jobs, and that bleeds into our personal lives. And so this evening, we're going to talk about how we're each using process differently in our own examples. And so with our varied backgrounds, that's going to be a little interesting. Jake, would you like to kick us off with your discussion about process?
Yeah, sure. So I want to come at the topic of process from a little bit of a different angle. So yes, I'm a big tech nerd. I work in the IT space as a project manager for my day job, but that's not the fun part of life, right? The fun part of life is I get to cook and am involved in the barbecue community. And so I compete in barbecue spaces. I judge barbecue events. And I, of course, cook barbecue for my friends when they jump to our side of the river. Process in barbecue competitions is so critical. It's not just a matter of, I threw some stuff on the smoker and I add some spices and seasonings and everything came out wonderful. You really have to think about when you're going to start your cook, how long you want it to cook for, but you have this variable of temperature, right? and as I say all the time, we cook to temperature, not time. But when you're at a competition, right, you have a turn-in time, right? Your chicken needs to be turned in at noon. So that means that I need to think backwards from noon to, okay, I got to box my chicken. I got to take it off the smoker. I've got to let it rest. I've got to, then you work backwards from there. And that doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't happen without thought to the process, preparation. And then when you finish your competition and you've turned in all your boxes and then they have awards and you don't do so well, now you have to look at your process and you have to tweak your process and think, okay, what did I do wrong? Or in a better scenario, when you do win, then you need to think about, okay, what did I do this time that was different that caused me to win? And there's a lot of variability with a lot of this barbecue stuff when you think about process, because you've got to rely on judges and what the mood that a judge might be in, and you don't really know. But having a good solid process when thinking about barbecue is so critical to understanding what your output is going to be for the for your cook. So that's sort of, outside of the tech space, thinking about barbecue. That is where process is nearest and dearest to my heart.
Iterative process refinement. Very agile, Jake, even though we're doing barbecue. I like it. And your barbecue's excellent. So
Thank
I
you.
appreciate the sponsorship there. All right, Matt.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Matt.
No,
So tell us about yours.
I love what Jake said just because I love eating his barbecue. But, we all worked in software together, right? And I was a project manager. I've also been in sales and process is a very important part of that. Project manager, you're building out your project plans and you have your process to deliver. And in sales, you have your sales process. And, something I'm going through right now in my personal life is very process oriented that really kind of came to mind when we decided we want to talk about this. So I'm going through a home renovation. And, as of last month, I signed with a builder and, gave a deposit. And now they have their whole plan to build my house, right? And it's very interesting. And as I've been going through this process of like selecting builders and going through this process, I realized that home building and software is very different. It's important to be organized and have a process, but how you go about it's very different. And I learned early on, we're in software development, right? Like we talk about phases, right? Like let's do a phased approach. A lot of our clients, they ask for that. Hey, let's get the minimal viable product, the MVP up, and then phase 2 and phase 3. And, and we just keep moving along, right? So that was what I wanted to do for my house, right? Like, okay, let's just get this part of the house done in phase 1, and then phase 2 can be this and phase 3 can be that. And the more I learned about the home building process, I realized that that's not going to work. And do it all at once is kind of what I learned when it came to kind of building this home. So that was a very different differentiator between home building and building software. And, the thing that I love about, going through this with my builder now is that he builds out a project plan just like we build out project plans for software. So I like that. And I like seeing, okay, here it is. And then here are the dependencies. And here's where there could be some risk of us going over budget or over our timeline. So they are relatable. But yet that example I just gave is like, hey, that phased approach is not going to work in the housing world. So it's just kind of the ebbs and flows. And like throughout this home building process, like, look, I've worked for, services companies. Like I'm more prepared to work with these builders than other people, right? But like there was many points throughout this process when I was getting bids and meeting with other people where I was like, I am in way over my head. I don't know what is going on. I'm a little lost here. But here we are, we're going through it. I'm learning as we go. And let's just hope that the home at the end of this process is going to be great. And, processes are part of every part of our world, even though we're kind of really tech nerds. But here we are, home building, barbecue, process is important in all of these different industries.
If I can just jump in here really quickly, the interesting thing is that you talk about project management, you talk about delivery, and Josh mentioned agile delivery. You can't do construction agile. You can't do sprints where we're gonna we're gonna install the toilets and then tweak it. So now we're gonna install the floors, right? That doesn't work. You can't. I'm gonna build the master bedroom upstairs. I don't think you're supposed to use the word master bedroom, but I'm gonna build the main bedroom upstairs, and then at some point we'll lay the foundation. Doesn't work like that. And it's a mental shift. We did a renovation a couple of years ago, and it's a mindset shift, because we do A, then B, then C, then D. In software, we might do A, then C, then F, then G. Then you'll go back and forth. The process between software delivery and construction is very. You still need a process. But it's very different.
It's
I mean, would
waterfall.
you say, yeah, exactly,
It's
Josh, I was
waterfall.
just going to say that is waterfall methodology. You have to do A, and then you do B, and then C, and then you have to follow that every time you build a house.
Yep.
You need a
Right.
foundation, and you build up from
Framing.
there.
Right. Yeah, you got to do your framing. And yeah, the whole 9 yards. Exactly.
And if,
Exactly.
and if you don't, it gets really expensive.
Taking
Yeah.
drywall off that you finished already, that's going to cost you. That's going to
Yeah, it
cost
is.
you. Don't forget to run your wiring beforehand, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Josh, Jake and I both told our, process stories. Recently you kind of showed us some really good process flows or anything. We'd love to hear from you. What do you have to say about process and how it affects you in your life?
Surely. Surely. So, being an entrepreneur, being a serial entrepreneur, process is near and dear to me, because when you start a business, you generally have almost no process. And then over time, you develop process, right? And then you refine that process and it improves. And it's that process and that improvement that allows you the margins to profit from in a business. That's why over time you see the profit margins of a business grow and its overall earnings grow through exposure and refinement of process. So at Dynamic Specialties Group, we're of course, a Salesforce or a CRM consulting firm, right? We do Salesforce and HubSpot, and delivery is all about process. Making sure that we deliver a good end product to the client requires us to follow steps at the beginning. And if we're redeveloping those steps every time we do a project, there's a lot of manual waste there, right? A lot of thought process going into how you manage the process and not being applied to the actual work that we're doing. So we started to analyze this for a client, and we realized that while we have process in our head, we haven't documented our process either. And so we sat down and actually did a flowchart documentation of from a client being unknown to us all the way through to a client becoming an alumni, finishing their project. And we became very clear about where our process was breaking down, where there were holes in the process, what needed to be improved upon, what was duplication of effort. And we improved the process for delivery specifically. We aligned the level of effort and quote generation all the way through to timekeeping and invoicing, so that there's no translation between any of those steps. Everything's always called the same. And what you do in step 2 is always done in step 2. You never have to think about it, which reduces our consultants' brain power lost on trying to figure out how to do the work. They can now remain completely focused on simply doing the work, which reduces the overall stress load for everybody and results in a better product. And this comes directly out of my experience as a paramedic. For 10 years, I was working in high stress environments, and it was 100% due to process that was beat into me through rigorous training that I was able to be effective of those scenarios. Because you can imagine a call's going south, things aren't going the way you want. What do? You fall back on your process. You start back at the top and work your way back down through. It's the same thing that we do in project management when we're doing delivery. If we have a process and we get lost, things aren't working, we fall back to that process, rework through the steps, figure out where we are and move forward. So we're seeing immediate returns on that right now, and it's pretty impressive. I'm very excited about it. I'd say we're about 75% of the way done documenting, aligning, and we're preparing to build and fill in those holes because we can see where it's at now rather than trying to keep it in our head. That's
You
all I
know,
got to say.
well, so as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about a project that I'm currently working on for a large client, and they have very disparate processes, right? They've got offices all over the globe, and the way that they do things in this part of the world versus the way that they do things in this part of the world is completely different. And it's interesting because everybody has their process that they like to hold on to, right? Everybody has their, this is the way we do things. Why do we do it that way? That's the way we've always done it, right? Or there's an outcome that they're looking for, and that outcome that they're looking for, they have to go through 85 different hoops to get to this outcome, because their processes are so complex. But the outcome ultimately is wants revenue. So the reason why I mention this is that you're talking about, as a small business owner, developing processes is critical. But even when you get into large businesses, you want to look at your processes on a regular basis, right? You want to look at
Yeah.
your go to market processes. You want to look at your delivery processes. You want to look at your HR, your finance processes, etc., your barbecue processes, your construction processes, whatever it is, and continue to look at your process. And when you have a new goal, when you have a new something that you're trying to hit, how do we adjust the process, and how do we not just pile this process on top of this process on top of this process on top of this process, and then in order to sell to your clients, now we've got to go through 85,000 different steps and 2,500 reviews and blah blah blah. This is the next thing, and that's what happens when you get with these large legacy companies, where they have these processes. They may even be well documented, but they're not efficient. And nobody's going in and saying,
Right.
hey, why do we do this stuff?
It's easy to do
Sorry,
as a small business. No, you're spot on, right? Somebody's got to own the process and continue to keep it live. The process is living. It's a living
yes.
document, and it's living because it's composed of people, right? It's the people that make the process work, and we're all biological beings, right? And so it's living as well. And somebody has to be responsible to keep that process updated and realistic. And then overall, there needs to be process review on a recurring basis. My GM and I were just talking about this today, that, hey, we've got these processes here now. How do we keep them relevant? How do we ensure that they worked 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago when we introduced them? They improved things, but it's been a month. That could have changed. It's really
Mm-hmm.
important for process to be reviewed and nurtured and kept alive. And that's hard for a small business to do, because oftentimes you build it and you set it. You're like, I'm using it, it's good. And then you move on to the next thing because of limited resources.
Josh, I'm a little disappointed in you. You missed that perfect opportunity. You said it and forget
And forget it. There might be a copyright on that, Jake. I don't know.
I'm sure there is, but I think he's dead. So I think
Okay,
we're
that's
okay.
fair. That's fair. That's fair.
And if he's not, I forget who said it. But if you're not dead, I apologize.
Jake, I think all of us, as with project management in our past, has always heard, yeah, that's the way we've always done it.
Oh, I hate that.
Why do you need? Oh, that's the way we've always done it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's your answer. Okay,
Yeah.
and you as a project manager can push back, but at some point, it that's the client, So
Client wants
that's
to pay the bills, so you can't fight him too terribly much.
It's all about the human at the core of it, and that's what we focus on, or what gets missed. But Dynamic Specialties Group really focuses on. Humans aren't good at change. We're risk adverse creatures by nature. It's better to assume that a stick's a snake than to assume a snake's a stick. And we have that negativity bias out of survival. It's rooted in our animal brain, and so it's always working behind the scenes to keep us from getting injured, right? And so people who have an Excel sheet that works right now and they're not feeling any pain from it other than inconvenience. They know the pain they're getting. It's the devil you know, right? And then you come in with this fancy new car, right? They're used to riding a bicycle and you're like, I got a Porsche for you today and it's going to be awesome. And they're like, a $60,000 car, like I ride a $1,500 bicycle. This is terrifying. I've never driven this before. And what do? Well, they might drive it while you're watching, but they're going to park it and get back on the bicycle because they know they're not going to wreck it. It's not going to cost them anything. They understand that process. And so getting the human to make small incremental steps into that new process where they're rewarded for successfully using the tool, and the tool serves them enough that it's a joy for them to use, it benefits them, and they can see that. That's the trick to managing change management. And the executive team has to account for that drop in productivity. If you're going to give your team a new tool that's a change in process, you can't expect them to produce at the same level and hold them accountable at the same level when they've got that learning curve. All humans have to learn. When you're transitioning from that bicycle, it's going to take you a few months to learn how to drive the car, and you probably should start with a Civic instead of a Porsche. And I think that's oftentimes overlooked when we're like, I need these numbers, we need efficiency, we're going to do it. And then the end user's like, but I like my Excel sheet. I don't get yelled at for this.
I've got a couple of responses to what you just said. The first thing that I want to say, and I don't know if Matt, I don't know if you picked up on this, Josh. Where are you buying a $60,000 Porsche? Because I'd
Yeah,
like
I
to
was
buy
just
a
throwing some numbers out
$60,000
there.
Porsche.
I got no clue. I don't buy Porsches. I'm still on that RAV4. I love it.
But you're right, and I think and the piece that I think that you touched on that I actually had never thought of before was that drop in productivity, right? A lot of times we go into client spaces. We're gonna, the sales team goes in and says we're gonna you're gonna put this application in place and everything is gonna run smoothly. Well, it's and that you may get there, right? But with every change, especially if it's a significant change, seeing that you're going to see that drop in productivity as the learning curve is coming up. And if you and your gut and the question is that how much of that productivity drop are you willing to experience, and how much are you willing to invest to protect that drop, right? Because if you don't do productive enablement, you don't have training sessions, you don't provide the funds to have the resources to be able to teach people how to leverage these new tools, how to leverage these new processes, then the productivity is going to drop and it could hit the floor, excuse me, before it picks back up. It's sort of a question of, which is costing you more money, the resources to train people, to the enablement, or the drop in productivity. And I don't think that there's a way to necessarily calculate that. But when you said that, it sort of clicked in my head, and that's a really interesting thought that I hadn't actually thought of before.
It needs to be accounted for in the overall budget. We're not just spending dollars to execute, we're spending bandwidth, right? Resource bandwidth. Even the fact that they're just thinking about it is taking it away from thinking about their job. Um, and that has to be accounted for someplace in the budget, even if it's ambiguous and, oh, we're going to lose 3%. I mean, somebody will lose 3% off the bottom line. Okay, well, we can put a number on that now, and then we can weigh that against, well, what happens if we train a little bit better? Can we reduce that 3%? And I think those metrics are really hard for a business to understand, and absolutely for an external consultancy, because we just don't have the insight into their internal metrics to be able to say, oh yeah, see, there was that 5% dip we were expecting. And so, but it does need to be in the executive and well, I guess the whole team's mind that there is a cost to change, and it's not always dollars.
That's true. That's true.
Matt, you got anything on that?
No, guys, this is, I'm learning just listening to you two, honestly, So I guess when we're talking about tech nerds, like I fall in the not really category over here. But, guys, it's in everything we do, process matters. And, my wife works in athletics, and they have processes to get set up for games. They have processes, getting the season started and things like that. So, and Josh, you've talked a lot about, delivering, consultancy sort of work and just think about the organizations that handle stuff internally and they have their own process. And then we've always worked with clients where they have their process and like, hey, we do it this way, but they're like, no, we do things this way. And there's always going to be, push and pull when it comes to a process, whether you're working with a client, whether you're working internally, whether you're working in another industry. Everyone comes in with their preconceived notions for a process, and that might jive with some of your teammates or some of your clients, or they might have a total different way of wanting to do things and making sure that it's optimized to work for both parties or however it is. So, we could go on all day talking about processes, but I
We
feel
sure
like
could.
this guys, we talk all night, but you guys gave some great examples and this is an exciting topic and it starts with barbecue and here we are, so this is good stuff, guys. I'm enjoying this.
So
Nice.
Jake, you were out talking about AI at a conference a couple of weeks ago. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what you were talking about?
Yeah, that was actually a really great experience. So, AI is huge right now, right? I mean, I think that everybody, whether or not they admit it or whether or not they even know it, they're leveraging AI in some form or capacity. Just the other day, I was at a website and a chat bot popped up, and that was not a person that I was talking with. A bot, and because that company, I don't remember which company it was, but that company follows the AI ethical guidance. It says you're talking to a bot, not a person, and that's part of the ethics of AI. But I was at a conference at Johns Hopkins University at their business school at their AI symposium, and I was on a panel sort of talking about AI in technology and in healthcare. And I don't have a ton of experience in the healthcare space, but I obviously have a lot to talk about when it comes to technology and technology implementations and things like that. And one of the and I made 2 points while I was there that I think are really they're things that are really worth thinking about, right? And the first one was, and I feel that this is pretty obvious, but maybe not everyone agrees. Everybody's concerned that AI is going to take their jobs, and honestly, if you're a low level contract attorney whose job it is to churn out the same contract again and again and again, like your job is in trouble, right? You need to be at that higher level of abstraction, and so that the bot can't do your work. You need to sort of refine your skills. However, I really think that the AI revolution is going to break out in two different categories. If you think back to when PCs hit the market, there were steno pools and typewriters, right? And PCs hit the market, and everybody, and all of a sudden, all these executives had computers on their desks. They didn't need somebody to take dictation and type it up from the steno pool. That changed, and the people, the workers, the employees that said, "I'm not going to use a computer," they were left behind, and they refused to learn. At the time, it was probably like Word Perfect or Lotus 1 2 3 or whatever. We've evolved since then, but now it's AI, right? And so the question is not is AI going to take my job? The question is really, how am I going to adapt the way that I work to leverage AI? And I think a lot of people, and we've talked about this, one of my favorite tools is ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT is a great tool. I might be one of the few people, Josh and I might be some of the few people that pay to use ChatGPT. But right now I see a lot of people using ChatGPT as a search engine. It's not a search engine. That's a waste of resources. But you need to figure out how to leverage that tool to do what you want it to do. And if you can do that, it will help it'll help your career prospects. That was the first thing that I touched on. The second thing that I touched on was actually sort of a challenge that comes with these AI tools, right? We are implementing. My job is implementing technology, right? So when we build an application, there's an input, there's a process, there's an output. And as we're thinking about quality, as we're thinking about software performance, that input, process, output needs to be predictable, right? If I put in the color red, am I going to get out the word blue, right? That's what the process, that's what it is. And so I've got testers on my team that they put in the word red, they hit the button, and then out comes the word blue, and everything's great. But AI is not going to let you do that. You put your large language model in between. All three of us could put the same prompt into an AI tool and get completely different answers based off of preferences, location. Who knows exactly? Somebody knows how these large language models operate. I certainly don't. I know how to use them. I don't know how they work. But that's going to start to become a big problem, especially when you start talking about financial applications. You start talking about other business oriented applications, HR applications, things like that. In some instances, that's great. In some instances, that's going to be a really big challenge because we need our technology to be predictable, and AI is not always predictable.
We rely on that unpredictability actually so we adopted ChatGPT early for bid and proposal process because I recognize that humans are absolutely terrible at bid and proposal. Estimation is just not a skill humans are excellent at. And so oftentimes early on, we found ourselves in the change order space a lot. Didn't like it. And as we grew, we started to implement ChatGPT. And so we would use transcripts, we'd use requirements, we'd feed them in, ask it to send it back in the format that we're requesting, following our breakdown and so forth. And then we'd input that into our Excel sheets and then work it from there. What we found out is that by feeding it into separate people's chat GPTs and then bringing those numbers together, we're getting multiple opinions from ChatGPT on what a good number should be. And then we dial it down to what we feel is appropriate and try to keep the human bias out so that there's enough space in there for success. But having the two separate GPTs that have different experiences coming back with similar numbers increases our confidence that the assessments are accurate. And then, of course, like I said, we work it with the human eye from there. It's like having a super inexpensive intern, right? Like for $30 a month, you get the world's smartest and most daft intern all at once. But it'll sit there and run circles for you all day long if you keep telling it. And I think that's really the value. But that unpredictability, I think, is useful in that instance. But I agree with you as far as like medicine, right? You can't be putting in a normal sinus rhythm and having it telling you that it's VTAC or AFib, right? Like it needs to say normal sinus, or else you can't provide treatment based upon that. And so that reliability is critical.
Sure.
Yeah, Jake, and you talked about, people fearing for their jobs, right? With AI, right? And when I think of the biggest fears with AI, I can't help but think about, as a kid seeing the Terminator, right? Like that machines are just going to take over the world. Whether taking their jobs, one thing, but taking over the world is another thing, and it's kind of me leaning on my not really, telling this joke here, but like AI's been around for a long time, but here we are where it's like it's crossing over to something we need to think about on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the phrase is the singularity, right? It's the when our machines ever going to get to a point where they're self aware and gonna take over the human race. I gotta tell you, I don't think that that's likely. I think that you still need you're still going to need humans to interact with the machines, and in the worst case scenario, right? Think about this for a second, right? ChatGPT runs on servers. Those servers are somewhere in the world, and those servers are powered by electricity. Humans can run without electricity. Computers cannot. And even if even with battery backup, I don't see a Terminator type situation with AI. But that doesn't mean that AI doesn't introduce a whole lot of ethical questions on whether or not we should be leveraging AI, or what is the most appropriate way to make sure that we're leveraging AI that is not including biases in its responses. Right? We don't want to come back to the medical question for a second. We don't want uh, you know Josh, who's a white male, puts a question in AI about a medical something or other, and he gets diagnosed because AI knows he's a white male, so it must be this. Or Matt, if your wife puts something in AI, oh, it must be this because she's a woman, right? We need to be we need in there we need to be very careful when leveraging AI to make sure that we don't have these biases in there. And I found that for the most part, ChatGPT is very good about that. But you know what's really bad about that is the Amazon Alexa. Amazon Alexa introduces its biases in responses all the time, and it's and to an extent where they're often political biases that you may or may not think are controversial, but they are, because it'll for example, if you ask Alexa, should I get vaccinated? Well, I believe you should get vaccinated. Alexa believes you should get vaccinated, but somebody may not believe that, right? And so you do it's woven in there. I think ChatGPT's done a good job of saying, hey, this is your decision, and as opposed to saying saying like, here are the facts, as opposed to being more outright in that statement of opinion.
It's good for ideation.
Yes.
I love it for adding. I love it for that, the ability to add new content to the idea machine. It's a great place for that in all aspects. I use it for personal improvement. Like I ask it to tell me stuff I don't know about myself, and it may be wrong, it may be right. I don't know, but it's a new idea that gets introduced into the machine. Think about it, and who knows where it's going to end up.
Mhm.
I like the sometimes randomness of it, or what I feel to be random. Who knows? I'm sure there's a pattern there someplace. So,
I had a friend, one of my youngest, one of the friends of one of my youngest son. His father is in data analytics for some nonprofit, and one of his colleagues was leveraging ChatGPT and had to fix something in the house, right? Whatever it was, he had to fix, a door, or whatever. It doesn't matter what it was. And he said, "What tool do I need to use to fix this thing?" Right? And Chat, you need to use a 3/4 inch socket wrench, whatever it was, right? And he's like, I know I have one, but I don't know which it is. Can you tell me which of these tools it is? And he uploaded a picture of like 5 different tools and said, "Can you tell me which one it is?" And the way that the story goes, and I wasn't there, so I don't know how true the story is, but it's a good story if it's true, and it's even a good story if it's not true. He uploaded, and ChatGPT said, "Oh, I can't do that. I don't know what tool it is." And the guy cajoled ChatGPT. He said, "Come on, you can figure it out." ChatGPT once again said, "No, I don't know." And then said, "Come on, just try, see what happens." And ChatGPT said, "Fine," and then took the picture and drew a circle around the tool that ChatGPT thought it was, which ended up being the right tool. It's almost like what is it? The old marriage proposal thing. You got to ask your father-in-law 3 times before if you want before you get
Yeah, I
married.
didn't do that.
Neither did I. But anyway, but I mean, but it's interesting because here was this tool that saying I can't do that. That is not within my area of capabilities. But we were able to convince the tool that yes, you can. We're able to convince a machine to do what we wanted. I mean, that's that I thought, true or not, that's a true story. I think that's an awesome story.
interesting. Just like a child.
Just like a child.
Just like a child.
Listen to me better than my kids do. You'll get there, man. Yours is,
Well,
your buddy's too young right now to tell you no, but just wait, it's coming.
all right, guys. Well, it sounds like we're getting to the point where we're winding down. So let's close out with one final question. What is your favorite AI tool right now? Jake, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I love using ChatGPT, but I am a Salesforce employee, and so I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the amazing things that Agentforce can do for you and your business. One of the really cool things that I've found in my use of Agentforce is it's leveraging a large language model to implement a large language model, and by that I mean in the back end of Agentforce, you write a prompt, and then you say, when somebody asks about this, do this, include these data points, and I could talk about the trust layer and how it's protected data and stuff like that. That's all very important, but not really relevant for this. But the thing that I think is really cool is instead of you know instead of I need to write a piece of code that says loop for this and then if this and then this blah blah blah. I'm just going to write it in plain English and deliver it. Now I don't know enough about Agentforce to say whether or not Agentforce works in other languages. I'm going to assume it does, but I don't know that for certain because I don't speak any other languages. But I do think that there is a lot to be said for that level of capability within a platform where we no longer need developers.
I don't want to hear that. That PD1 exam was hard, brother. That took me like 3 years to pass. I mean, don't
I
say
failed
that.
it twice. I failed it twice.
Oh man, yeah, I think it was 3 times before I passed that exam, and I had to do a boot camp, and it was not easy.
Oh, oh
So,
man, that's a tough one.
all right, Matt, what's your favorite AI tool right now?
Oh, really good question. I like what Jake said about Agentforce, but I think about the tools that I use on a day to day. I've been using a tool called Grammarly for a long time. Of course, I use ChatGPT, but one tool that a friend put me onto a year or two ago, it's called WordTune. and it's just, I type, in my own words, I type out what I want, and then I tell WordTune to rewrite it for me. And for some reason, it still feels like I'm writing it, even though this AI tool rewrote it for me. But hey, it was my words in the beginning. They put the better spin on it, so it just feels more like mine. Like I remember when I first started using ChatGPT, emails, cover letter, whatever it is, I'm like, this isn't me. That's not me writing this. Like, I don't write that way. So when someone put me on a word tune and I would write it out and then they would rewrite it for me, it just felt more like me. So that, I guess, is my favorite AI tool.
Excellent.
What about you,
I'll have
Josh?
to give that a shot. Yeah, I'm shameless here. It's ChatGPT. I've been using it since it came out. I've got the business version. I've got one for the personal. I've got I've got chats running my personal medical care, right? It's got all my medical records in it, and it's recommending how I should treat myself and help solve some of the problems. On the business side, I've got mentor GPTs that are loaded with different texts to guide it in strategy. And I mean, it's it has really been a force multiplier for me as an entrepreneur. I have made significant advancements in my business's stability over the last year and a half, and I would say a lot of that has come by having this amazing digital assistant, right? That knows everything but can't do really very much anything. It really makes things a lot faster. I spend a lot less time researching. So yeah, ChatGPT is the winner for me.
Let me ask you a question because I mentioned the trust layer for a second. You're feeding all of your medical information into ChatGPT, into the large language model. Are you do you have any concerns about the model consuming your information and then sharing that data with somebody else?
You know, I, I don't have a personal concern, but I do know that on using the personal ChatGPT and not the business to manage my medical care is a little bit riskier because they do train their models on that data, where the business side of the house, they don't train the models on that data, so it's a more secure environment. So I guess if I was concerned about it, I would probably put it in the business model versus the personal account. But at this point, there's nothing in there that I'm worried about anybody seeing. But what I really want to know is that I can feed my constant glucose monitor data into there, and it can help me understand why I'm getting spikes in the morning and getting lows in the afternoon and help me level that out. Because I'm telling you, I'm not going to find a doctor who's going to sit there and go over that with me every morning at 6 a.m. and help me develop ideas on how to solve it. I'm going to talk to that doctor once a month if I'm lucky, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's
So
interesting.
I think it's well worth the risk. Geez, I even feed my EKGs in. I've got one of those cardiac EKG monitors, so I run an EKG every couple of months just to check it out. And I mean, there's a lot of value there. And the more complex your medical care is, I think it really has an opportunity to empower the patient to be a more informed and self-advocate. Because a lot of times we defer a great deal of trust and authority to the medical professionals purely because of our lack of experience and knowledge. And if we had a few more details, we'd probably stop and say, wait, what? You didn't tell me there was a risk with that IV, that I could have a stroke from an IV? Has anybody ever stopped and told you that you could have a stroke from an IV?
No, that's interesting.
No, nobody.
Oof.
But it's a risk. I mean, it's a low risk, but there's always the opportunity to shear off the catheter inside the vein, or to a skin tag to get loose, and that's gonna lodge someplace, and that could cause a stroke. And so, but nobody knows to ask that question because nobody's a medical professional. But ChatGPT might list it as a risk to a procedure if you asked it, and then you could ask your medical professional to explain that to you, how they're not going to do that to you, or determine that it's unnecessary. Oh, I'm just rehydrating with 1 liter of fluid because I'm a little dehydrated. Maybe I don't need to risk a stroke and I can just go drink a liter of Gatorade or a liter of water. Mm.
Josh, I love you putting on your EMT hat there. And really,
Sorry. Yeah,
said,
got a little
said
deep.
this earlier. Listening to both of you guys talk, I definitely feel like the tech nerds on the not really side. Again, I reiterate it. And guys, this was a great conversation about processes, about AI. I really am excited about this podcast. I think this was a great first episode. Before we go, we have to get a word from our sponsor.
Oh, look at that! Thank you, Matt. I'm going to share a screen, and we'll have a word from our sponsor. So today's episode, if it works, there we go. Sponsored by the K-Town Pit Q. Is that sharing? Maybe that's sharing. Look at that. Okay, so the K-Town Pit Q is an in-home barbecue cooking school that focuses on family, friends, and community. So with the K-Town Pit Q, we bring expert barbecue instruction, guiding you step by step as you cook. From chicken to ribs to pulled pork, you'll learn the art of barbecue while enjoying it in the comfort of your backyard. That's why at the K-Town Pit Q, you are the pitmaster.
I can't think of a better
that's
sponsor.
I love it.
As a meathead, K-Town Barbecue. Guys.
Nice.
Well, we had barbecue, what, was it last weekend?
It was last weekend, yeah. It was almost 7 days ago.
We were at Jake's house for barbecue last weekend, and that was excellent. All the kids, that was a good time.
That was a good time.
Thank you, Jake.
Cool.
And thank you, Matt, for joining us. Getting all together tonight. This is a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yes. Thank you, guys. Looking forward to it.
Good chatting, and we'll talk to you in the next one.
Be well.